Welcome to the History with Ali podcast, where we discuss all things history, literature, and media studies. Today I'm joined by Australian author Wendy J. Dunn. However, before we begin today's conversation, I'd like to offer a brief content warning. Our conversation includes discussion of suicide and mental health as they relate to historical events and literature. If these topics are difficult for you, please take care while listening or consider skipping this episode. So, Wendy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's amazing to finally be able to speak to you.
Oh, I'm very happy to be talking to you, Ali. Thank you so much for asking me to be part of the podcast. I'm
Of,
very excited about that too.
of course. Could you introduce yourself for our listeners?
My name is Wendy J. Dunn. I'm an Australian author who is obsessed by the Tudors, unfortunately for me, because I'm so far away from England. I've been writing about the Tudors for a long time now. This novel actually came out, Dear Heart, How Like You. This actually came out in 2002, which sometimes I just, it's been a long journey. The Tudors have set my life on a wonderful adventure of learning, and yeah, it's kept me very happy in my life in that sense. Yep. Is that all?
How did
Mm.
you get into the Tudors as someone from Australia?
Oh, I have told this story so many times. I had a great love of history from being a small child. And when I was 10, one of my friends gave me a child's book of English history. And in that book, there was a chapter about Elizabeth I. And as she was wont to do in her own time, she just caught my heart. And I just loved the story of her triumph, how she was the unwanted daughter. And then she ended up being this amazing queen for 44 years. Story also led me to her mother's story. And both women are so strong. And for a child who needed to have inspiration, definitely inspired me as an example of what women can achieve, despite having many things thrown in their way. So yeah, yeah. So I'm very thankful to my friend who gave me that book, and I've still got it on my bookshelf. Mm.
That's wonderful, and thank goodness for that friend, because that
Yes,
really
I
just
know.
took you on a
I know.
path. That is so cool. So, when did you start writing?
I've always wanted to be a writer. I remember thinking when I was 8 years old, because I loved books. And I was always amazed, anything, a book there or a newspaper, anything that had writing on it, I would be reading it as a child. So when I was 8, I decided that I wanted to author a book, write a book. I didn't say it in the sense of I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be someone who wrote a book. But yeah, life gets in the way. I was a working class girl, so I wasn't really encouraged to even finish my education, let alone be a writer. I actually married at 18, had my first child at 19. So if I ever write my bio, it'll be writer interrupted. But you've got to live a life to be able to
Mm-hmm.
write what we are given in life and the journey that we walk. Yeah, so I'm not regretful of getting married at 18. I'm not regretful of having 4 children, because it's given me depths as a writer to experience all those sort of things. Yeah. Mm, mm.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Wow. 4 children. That's amazing. It must be a busy house.
Oh, well,
Uh,
they're all grown up. They're all grown up now. My youngest just turned 30 the other day. So I'm struggling with that as much as he is struggling with turning 30. But yeah. Mm.
yeah. It sounds like me and them are similar ages because I'm about to be 36, so I'm a bit older. So then how did you combine the decide to write about the Tudor world? Because I know that Shades of Yellow is not your first foray into the Tudor writing.
I think we have to write to our passions. My husband often says to me, why don't you write something that will actually sell books? And he'd give me some suggestions and whatever, and I'm sort of roll my eyes at him. Not, because other people who don't write don't realize how hard it can be. And you do have to have that passion, that fire to write. Well, for me, I have to be passionate about what I write. And definitely the Tudors are something that keeps me very, very passionate. I want to learn about them and it fires my imagination. So yeah, yeah. When I started my first novel, Dear Heart, How Like You This, that came about because I went to the library one day and I stared at the shelves with all the historical fiction books because that's what I was looking for, is a historical fiction book to read, and realized that all the books on the shelf that I would have read, I had already read. So that was the moment I said to myself, well, why not write your own? Write the book that you'd like to read. And I had already been thinking about the line, Dear Heart, How Like You This, comes from the line from a poem that was written by Sir Thomas Wyatt. Legend has it is that Anne Boleyn, well, he loved Anne Boleyn, and some of his poetry was directed to Anne. What's there as in history just really strongly suggests that yes, that is likely to be the case. And Dear Heart, How Like You This has been a particular, well, it's not actually entitled Dear Heart, How Like You This, but that's a line in the poem. And that particular poem has always been a poem that's been, this is what he wrote about Anne. That poem just caught my heart. It's a poem about a man who's lost a person that he loved and sees her forever going out of his grip and going into another life because now she belongs to Caesar, not to him. So it's full of grief and sorrow. Yes, so he's a very, Thomas was a very romantic poet. And it was a real joy to give voice to him in Dear Heart, How Like You This, even though we had arguments also, because he was determined that I would write the book his way. It was a very interesting experience of, yeah, surrendering my imagination to a voice of someone else. And yeah, yeah, had some really interesting experiences writing that.
I look forward to reading it because I always think it's so interesting that Thomas Wyatt was released. He was the only man accused released, but as you said, there's some evidence that he actually was the only one who ever did love
Mm,
Anne of all of them.
yeah, yeah. Well, the story goes with that is that Cromwell liked him a lot because Thomas was a very likable man, and because Cromwell really liked him, yeah, that sort of helped big time with regarding getting released from the tower. But he ended up in custody with his father for a bit. And yeah, yeah, he's very, very fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Cromwell was the man to be on the good side at that time for sure. So could
Exactly.
definitely want to talk about Shades of Yellow now. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah. Well, it's a story because I always have wanted, well, I shouldn't say always. After writing Dear Heart, How Like You This, I did think to myself, it would be lovely to write a book about writing a book because it's such an amazing journey. Actually, for me, to write a novel, there is such a story behind every one of my novels about how they came to be. And so that was when I first started thinking about it. I actually did start it in 2010 when one of my dear friends, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I had an idea about writing this book about a woman who had breast cancer and also writing the story about Amy, because Amy Dudley was one of the stories about Amy was the fact that she may have died from a spontaneous fracture of her spine when she fell down the stairs due to the fact that she had breast cancer. So I started the book and I wrote the first chapter, but at that time, my friend was going through treatment and I had no idea if my friend was going to survive. And it was just too painful to write it then. And also, I didn't know what was going to happen with Lucy because I, put this situation, started this situation. So it was just too painful at that time to write that story. And I put it, filed it away. And then a few years ago, I rediscovered that first chapter with the idea of doing a book of my character Lucy, writing about Amy Dudley and having the two stories echoing each other, and that, through I do believe in for myself that writing is for me has always been a way of seizing my life and also working out, things and knowing how to go move forward. And I find writing very, very healing myself. I can write about situations that have been very painful in my life, and through writing those experiences, it gets out on the paper and I can actually deal with the situation and move on. So that was something else I wanted to convey in the story about Lucy, who I, they say about with writing fiction that you should have your character, your main character, up a tree and throw stones at that character and make it really, really hard. And I think I did make it very hard for Lucy because not only does Lucy at a young age experience losing her breasts and having to survive cancer treatment, but 2 years prior to the story starts, her marriage breaks up because her husband has an affair. So, and then when the story starts, she goes to her doctor for her regular checkup, her annual checkup, and she discovers that she's got a small brain tumor. So I did throw a lot of stones at poor Lucy, but she's dealing with all that situation through writing about Amy Dudley. And so I wanted a story about a woman reclaiming her life and surviving. And yeah, yeah. So I've done it now. I've done my what they call a metafiction novel, a novel about writing a novel. But of course, it's so much more than that as well.
I really enjoyed the dual timeline story because I read a lot of Tudor historical fiction and I love it, but this was so original to me. I absolutely loved it. And, I love the story of Amy Dudley, but could you tell our listeners who may not know anything about Amy Dudley who she was?
Yeah, this is the unfortunate thing about Tudor women. There's so many Tudor women that we don't know enough about who are basically forgotten about from history, just basically regards them as wives of men or daughters of men. They're not really seizing their own agencies in their own life. Amy Dudley was married to Robert Dudley. And as we all know, Robert Dudley was the man who came closest to marrying Elizabeth I. They were childhood friends. This is Robert Dudley and Elizabeth. They were friends from the time that they were 8 when Elizabeth told Robert Dudley that she would never marry after the execution of Catherine Howard. Amy was an heiress, so she grew up in Norfolk. Robert met her when they were 17. They were both the same age. I think she might have been 2 weeks older than him. And when Robert went up with his father, John Dudley, to put down the riots, the rebellion that were going on at that time, so he took his 17-year-old son with him. I'm not sure if Robert's older brother was with them as well. I don't think so. But that's when Robert met Amy. And I kind of imagine because Robert, even though he was a Tudor youth, he would have probably been exposed to executions. War is a different scenario. I would imagine that he would have been seeing men, because a lot of men were hanged through that rebellion, put to the sword. There was a lot of killing happening. So it makes sense to me that he would be looking around for some sort of emotional outlet. And he actually fell in love with Amy, and yeah, it was described as a very cardinal relationship at one stage. When later on, when oh yeah, William Seckel was talking about it. Yeah, so they fell in love, and because John Dudley had quite a few sons, I think at the time Robert would have been the third son, or maybe even the fourth son. So even though Amy wasn't nobly born, she was rich. So John Dudley allowed the marriage to go ahead. They were married in London, so they were only 18 when they both married. She was with him in London when he was imprisoned in the Tower by Mary the First. So she visited him in the Tower of London. So she was clearly a very supportive wife. There's no separation between them at that time. But when Elizabeth the First became queen, yes, it seems that something started even before that, because of course we know the story about Robert Dudley being in the Tower of London at the same time as Elizabeth, when Elizabeth was only 20 and fearing for her own life. So, but they always were friends, but it's possible that time in the Tower also fired up their relationship in another way, became more than friends. He actually loaned her money during that period of time. So by the time Elizabeth became queen, their relationship had become very interesting, could I say? And Elizabeth could be very possessive. She was very possessive of the people that she loved. She wanted all of them. She wanted them to be around her all the time. And so, in a sense, he separated from Amy. Even though he supported her financially, when she died, they hadn't seen each other for around about 15 months. But he was supporting her financially. He still referred to her as my lady. So it is really interesting about he obviously had fallen out of love with her because he wouldn't have left her so alone. She was staying, when she died, she was staying with relations at a place that was leased to her cousin. And her death, as we know, I mean, this is the thing, is that her death is the thing that we know the most, is that she died. She was found dead with a broken neck at the end of a short flight of stairs. A very suspicious death, which happened the day after Elizabeth I had her 27th birthday. So the question has always been, was Robert Dudley involved with her death or not? And yeah, we'll never ever find out. We can only have theories about this. Yeah, so in Shades of Yellow, there is a theory as to why it all happened. But yes, unless we ever get a confession, we'll never know for certain about her death. Only strong theories. Mm. Does that
Yeah,
tell you enough
it
about it?
definitely does. And then also the fallout from her death kind of made it so Elizabeth and Robert were doomed to never marry, basically, right?
Exactly. It shadowed them for the rest, especially Robert. It shadowed him for the rest of his life. His nephew, Philip Sidney, actually wrote a defense of his uncle many, many decades later, saying no, he wasn't responsible. It is possible that his men might have decided to do him a favor. That is a theory that has some, but I look at the letter that Robert wrote after Amy's death, and it does read to me of a man very shocked. And yeah, and I think he would have realized too that yeah, by her dying, that just put too much scandal on any possibility of him ever marrying Elizabeth. Mm. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so in the novel, Lucy is the main character, and she travels from Australia to England to do some research for her book that she's really that's kept her going. Writing the book has been a
Mm,
purpose for her, and so she gets the chance to go to England and actually do research. And she has family there that she can stay with, but she's not necessarily sharing with them about her health diagnosis. What
mm.
inspired you about the research that she was doing? Did you, for yourself, get to go to England to do some
Yes.
research for your books?
Yes. I think all the places that I wrote about, I definitely have been. So I have been to the Tower of London quite a few times now. I love the Tower of London. So I went up to Amy's birthplace in hope of actually visiting where, because the actual building has long gone, but there's a bridge over the moat that I wanted to see, but then I was staying with a friend and she explained to me that it was private property that, but in the book, I imagine that my Lucy was brave enough to ignore the fact that it was a private property and went there and stood on the moat and imagined Amy as a child, yeah, growing up there. So, yes, I tried to do a really good job of visiting places important to Amy's story because it is, Lucy is telling Amy's story. So, Oxford, she would have gone to Oxford quite a lot because she was quite close to that, close to Oxford. She actually is entombed in a church in Oxford, Mary the Virgin. So I went to visit her tomb. Yeah, so it's really for me as a writer to walk in the footsteps of my characters is important. It helps me to see them and imagine, and it opens up the door to their stories even more. And yeah, even just the fact that in the weather and because Australian skies are a different color to English skies and yeah, and the weather is definitely different to yeah. So yeah, walking with my characters and experiencing the places that my characters once knew is vitally important to me.
And do you think that Lucy shared characteristics with Amy? Because without giving too much away, Lucy is going through a divorce. As you mentioned, she had been cheated on by her partner after going through cancer treatment.
Well,
And yeah,
I'm going to toss that question to you. What did you think? Do they share characteristics?
I think that they do because they were both kind of trying to make sense of what was happening to them.
Yeah.
And I think that they both had agency. The way I read it, I don't think that Amy was really a victim. I think she was making decisions, which I thought was a great new take on it, especially because you started with how you were saying Robert was in the tower and soon after they had been married, and then their relationship was changing. But then, of course, Lucy's relationship with Ben in the book is changing. So, did you find those ways to kind
Yes.
of bring it together?
Yeah, well, that's the echoing, isn't it, of the stories and everything like that. In the beginning of the story, there was an important little bit which I wrote, is that about passive women. I'm actually very suspicious of any passive woman because I don't anything true about a passive woman at all. I think we can be very quiet at time, but there's a lot happening under our still waters. Well, they're not even still waters, but in Tudor times, women were told that to be virtuous, you had to be a silent woman. But as we know, there's remarkably strong women in Tudor times. Women are really good at working out how to get around expectations, and we have to navigate. We learn to navigate not only our woman world, but we navigate the world that's dominated by the male as well. And that was particularly true in Tudor times. It's all to do with survival, isn't it? Yeah. So that was one of the things I wanted to show is that both Lucy and Amy were definitely not passive women. They were seizing their lives in the ways that they could.
So something also that I thought was interesting in the Amy part of the novel was that there was an angel with her who kind of acted in a way like a conscience, but as well giving advice.
Mm,
What inspired you
yep.
to bring the angel into it?
Oh gosh, I keep on saying always, but that's not true. When I wrote my second Tudor novel, which it's in the voice of Catherine Carey, who is the niece of Anne Boleyn, I did have an angel and I had to kill my angel because someone pointed out to me, if you're writing this novel, because that novel, the target audience is young adult, or I suspect more adults have read that book and loved that book than young adults. They said, you just have to kill that angel. So I felt really sad about that. And the angel, to me, with the Tudors, as we know, they believed in that angels walked amongst us. They believed that devils walked amongst us. They believed in all sorts of things. So the angel is, in a sense, a metaphor for that kind of Tudor belief that was very important in that period of time, part of their fabric of their existence. And I just wanted to have Amy also in limbo, and so she can't be by herself in limbo. She needed to have someone there guiding her. And yeah, yeah. So the angel, yeah, became part of Amy's story. Mm,
Which is nice because, as you said, she does seem a bit like a lonely figure,
mm,
especially being abandoned by her
mm.
husband ultimately. And the way that women were at that time period, once you married, then you were away from your family for the most part. And so it
Oh
does
gosh,
seem like that Amy was very isolated
oh,
towards the
she
end.
was. Can you imagine? I mean, her family were so far away from her, and she appears to have been a very loved daughter, and she was also a very loved sister. Her brother, who was a bastard, when he never forgave Robert, he always thought it was Robert who caused Amy's death. And yeah, he became quite a thorn in Robert Dudley's side. So she was obviously very loved by people who were close to her, but she doesn't appear to have the same sort of network of people around her as what, of course, Robert had. Robert had a very large family who were actually very loyal to one another. And yeah, yeah, Amy does strike me as a woman who was, yeah, like you say, isolated and alone. And that makes me admire her even more that, yeah, she had to put up with quite a lot. Her husband, when he was imprisoned in the Tower of London for over a year, he had the axe hanging over him. So that would have been a nightmare time for not only Robert, but for her. And the whole Dudley family at that time were falling apart because John Dudley had been executed. Of course, you know that Jane Grey was married to Guildford Dudley, and they were executed the year after Mary the First became Queen of England. So it was a tragic, tragic time. And then, of course, when the sons of John Dudley were released, thanks to the great efforts of their mother, who worked tirelessly trying to get them out of the prison, the Tower of London, the eldest son, John, dies within days. So it's just tragedy after tragedy for them. Mm, yeah. And of course, Amy was part of that, what was going on at that time too. I don't know how many people could survive with all those things happening. And then you got the added burden of the fact that Robert and Amy were childless,
Yeah,
which is
and
another echoing of Lucy's story and Amy's story.
yeah,
Mm.
so both the interesting parallel, especially the time period, Amy could not leave Robert, but Lucy was able to leave Ben after a
Yes,
betrayal. One of my favorite scenes was when Amy met with Elizabeth and had the moment to confront her. Do you think something like that happened in real life, like that kind of encounter at least once?
I can imagine it could. Obviously, I did imagine it could because I wrote about it. It's possible. I think it is possible because she was in London. Elizabeth came to London for various reasons over the time. I could imagine a wife maybe being brave enough to have it out with the woman that she knows is stealing her husband from her. Yeah, yeah, especially if you know that if your husband is gone, then that really leaves you so with nothing in that time, you know. She's got no children, so she's in a sense a useless wife. Yeah, so yeah, I can imagine that it could happen. Knowing Elizabeth and the Amy that I imagined.
Do you
Mm.
think that Elizabeth cared what Amy thought?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, I'd like to think that she did, but Elizabeth could be very selfish to her own needs. And I suppose the thing is that she would have been probably thinking that she needs Robert far more than Amy needs Robert because she's Queen of England and he's her emotional support, and she's got so much on her plate regarding the first years of Elizabeth's reign. Everyone was taking bets as to whether Elizabeth would stay Queen of England. They all doubted the fact that this 25-year-old woman would be able to do that. So I suppose because of her fact that she could be very selfish with the people that she loved. Yeah, maybe she didn't. No, probably she didn't really. She probably numbed herself on what was going on with Amy because she also knew, she would have known that Robert was financially supporting Amy. And so Amy was being cared for in the sense that she wasn't being sent away like Catherine of Aragon and imprisoned anywhere and not allowed friends and whatever. There's letters of Amy sending to buying dresses and whatever. So she was still enjoying some of her life, even though it was without a husband, but she still had friends around her. And she was with her cousin, so Robert probably thought she was being looked after. And Elizabeth probably didn't, like you say, didn't really think very much about Amy's situation, except for the fact that Amy was alive and that prevented the step towards marriage with Robert.
Speaking of Amy and her death, something I thought was interesting is that she ordered a dress a week beforehand, which kind of goes against the suicide. And I
Yeah,
know you didn't really play into it being a suicide either. So,
no.
what made you kind of go down that road? Yeah.
Well, I actually felt to myself because as if they hadn't seen each other for 15 months, that she wanted to see him desperately. And she didn't realize, I mean, if it is true that she had the breast cancer, and it does seem to be very strong that the evidence does point that something was going on with her physically. The staircase was a very short flight of stairs, even though so many people do die from falling downstairs, but this was a short flight of stairs. So that doesn't really add to the suicide theory as well. You'd think to yourself, you would be taking yourself to a flight of stairs that was going to really do the trick, not one that was, that you could see yourself surviving okay. So I saw it as a cry of help. I saw it as a woman who was desperate to get her husband to remember that he had a wife and come to her. And he would have come to her if she was, ill or hurt in such a way that she needed him. Yeah, I couldn't imagine Robert not coming to her if she was hurt. Yeah, because they definitely did not hate each other. And there's with the letter that he wrote at her death, you could see there was grief in that letter as well
Yeah,
about her death.
it's so sad because he would have come home more if they had children and
Mm.
they didn't. So that wasn't an anchor. So,
Mm.
I think it does make sense that she may have been looking for other reasons for him to get him to come home. Just
And she wouldn't have realized by doing that well, we're giving away too much of the story, aren't we, Alex?
I think
Uh,
so.
yeah. But it's interesting to imagine a writer trying to also work this out for her own story. So there's Lucy. Sometimes I feel Lucy is my character that I wrote about. Me is Lucy's character. I often say my Lucy, her Amy. And it's working out the reason as to what actually happened that would make complete sense. Yeah, because it is interesting that day that Amy sent everybody away, except she couldn't get the old woman away. The old woman insisted on staying. So she was obviously seeing somebody. So who could it be? Who could that person be? Was that person
Yeah.
involved in death?
I know, and it's almost like we may never know, although I know that they've done some scientific analysis about the fall and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But do you think that there's a chance that Cecil was involved at all
Oh,
in this? He writes to everyone, right? So what
mm.
do you think the
he's got the
Cecil of it all is?
he's got the greatest motive because he did not want Robert to marry Elizabeth at all. And he was a very clever man. And he would have realized, as Robert realized when it happened, that by Amy dying in suspicious circumstances, that would actually stop any chance of Elizabeth making a very unwise marriage with Robert Dudley. I feel really sad because Robert was definitely the only man that Elizabeth trusted enough in her life, although he also betrayed her with marrying Lettuce later on. Yeah, so but still, she knew that he would give her his life for her, which he did in a sense. He did give his life, even though he did end up marrying Elizabeth's second cousin. But the woman that he ended up marrying was very much like Elizabeth, and he was desperate at that time to have children because the Dudleys, even though Robert Dudley came from he had 12 siblings or maybe 13 siblings, so it was a large family. The actual male Dudleys, none of them had legitimate offspring. Yeah. So yeah, I've
Yeah.
forgotten the question.
No, it's okay. So I was watching a Dr. Cat reading the past video about Amy in preparation for this, and she said a theory that I never thought of, and I just kind of wanted to know what you thought about it. She was
Okay.
saying that it was possible that Amy was killed elsewhere and moved to the staircase, perhaps by her killers. What do you think about that? Because I had never really thought about that before, but it was interesting.
Her injuries do indicate that it would have been a fall because she actually hit her head as well as break her neck. So it is like, she has fallen and she's gone onto the wall. She had a broken part of her skull. It is an interesting theory. Yeah, and again, we don't know. We can't that's another theory to add to the mix. But yeah, you think that Amy's injuries are the injuries that you would expect from someone who has fallen and not fallen really controlled, in the sense that she's ended up smashing. I've actually done this to myself. I was with my son and we were going to the movies, and I was scolding myself because I'm always holding on to stair rails, and I was saying to myself, you're just acting like a really, really old person, Wendy. You can do this without holding. So I just went down the stairs, and I tripped on the second last stairs and fell forward, and I smashed my head, and I almost knocked myself out.
Oh
And
no.
that didn't impress my son very much. So I'm feeling very shocked and shattered and wondering, seeing stars. So when I read that Amy's injuries also involved a head injury, I thought, oh yeah, she's done the same sort of thing as what I did. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think there would have been more evidence if she had been killed elsewhere. I think it would have been done a different way, because the fact that she's got a broken neck and a head injury, both are pointing more to the fall than it being done elsewhere. But that's interesting theory.
I guess we didn't talk about Amy's religion much, but I believe that suicide is a cardinal sin. So that to me, she may have taken that more seriously, so it might kind of show that's not what happened, possibly, because
Mm.
that's the worst thing that a
Yeah.
person could do, right? They would send them to hell.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's right. And you wouldn't be able to be buried in a church, you'd be buried outside the grounds. And yeah, it's definitely a no-no. Still a no-no. But in that time, that's condemning yourself to being cast down to hell without any hope of forgiveness. Because yeah. So that would be also something that is against the suicide theory.
Yeah, it's almost like the princes in the tower. It's just endlessly fascinating. There's a million theories, and we might never know.
I often wonder if there'll ever be a discovery of a confession. This is what happened. It's there somewhere.
Exactly.
It will be found, but until something like that turns up, we have only got I mean, even the trial because Robert Dudley had to convince people that he was innocent, and they regarded it as an accidental death. So, yeah, I definitely do not believe Robert did it. But, like I said before, there is a strong possibility that maybe his men might have thought, let's, because they probably wouldn't have looked at the whole situation. They would have just thought, our master is a man who could be King of England. Let's ensure that he's going to be King of England. Not realizing by doing that they've destroyed his chance of ever being King of England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's up to interpretation, and the more you learn, the more questions kind of you have.
Mm.
But so there there could be a sequel to this book. There's a lot
Yeah.
left. Is that something that you're
Yeah.
considering or
I have thought about it, because you're not the only person that has asked that question. I definitely would like to know what happens next with Lucy and her life. And she's got this book that she still hasn't finished, has she? So I would love to be able to have that book as being a finished book. That would be quite interesting to show, because there were so many things that Lucy went over to England thinking her novel was finished, and then things happened that showed her that yeah, the book needed to have a rethink, and her book was unraveling big time by the time the story ended, because there were so many other things that she was having to weave into her storyline. Yeah, she wasn't expecting witches to be part of her storyline, but there you go.
That's the one spoiler I won't give everyone. I almost asked, I've asked enough, but I highly recommend this book to everyone, and I really look forward to reading your other books. Could you tell our listeners your other books so they could go find them?
Yeah, I've got Dear Heart, How Like You This? And I can never say, I always have titles of books that I struggle to say sometimes. The Light and the Labyrinth. Did I say it right? And that's my second Anne Boleyn book. So the first one was written in the voice of Sir Thomas Wyatt, and that tells the whole story of Anne Boleyn through his point of view. Yeah, so that was really quite interesting that my first novel was written through a male point of view. Been told that's not really common to do that with a first novel, but I did it. The second one is done through the point of view of Catherine Carey, who's the niece of Anne Boleyn. And that actually was because I wanted to revisit the Anne Boleyn story because Dear Heart left me with so many unanswered questions. So Catherine goes to the court of Henry VIII in those last months leading up to the execution of Anne Boleyn. Anyway, so the question was in my mind was, why did a man who was so besotted with a woman decide to murder her? What was the actual push for that? So anyway, I did that in a young adult novel, which is, like I say, was written through the point of view of Catherine Carey. And then I had two novels that telling the story of Catherine of Aragon. So the first one is The Duty of Daughters, which takes us back to Castilia, to the court of Queen Isabel and Catherine of Aragon growing up. And that's through the point of view of Catherine of Aragon's tutor, Beatrice Galindo. That was really lovely because I felt that story made me fall in love with Spain, and I'm hoping to get, I've been to Spain now twice in my life, and I'm really hoping I can get there one more time. Would be lovely. And then the second part continues Catherine of Aragon's story. And that's actually my really bulky book, my longest book. So that's called All Manner of Things, and that's been all my novels have won awards, but that All Manner of Things has won quite a few awards. And then I've also written a non-fiction book called Henry VIII's True Daughter, a Tudor life, a Catherine Carey, a true Tudor life. So it's a long title. And that took me back to Catherine Carey's story and to actually prove in my mind that, and hopefully the people who read that book, she was actually the daughter of Henry VIII, which is that's another question that people are determined to either argue for or against. And I discovered not that long ago that Alison Ware, I tell you, this is so lovely. She has recommended this book. She used it in her research for her novel about Catherine Carey, which is the Boleyn sister. And lo and behold, in the acknowledgement, there she is. She's warmly acknowledging my book, which is really, makes me
That's
feel so happy.
remarkable. Yeah,
It
she's
is
she's
remarkable.
as great
Yes.
as it gets. So that is high praise. That's really cool.
It is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm really, really very happy about that. And then I'm also now writing my Elizabeth novel, which is something I've been wanting to do forever. And I have been wanting to do an Elizabeth novel for a long, long, long time. But it's also through the point of view of someone who's close to Elizabeth, who served Elizabeth from even before she became queen. And my person died in 1592. So that's a long period of time that I can tell Elizabeth's story. Mm, yeah. that'll keep me busy for a long time.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And how can our listeners find you on the internet?
Oh, I'm on Instagram. Also, I've got a website, which is just easy, wendyjdunn.com. You can find me everywhere on Goodreads, on Facebook. Yeah, everywhere. So hopefully I'm have a certain degree of visibility. But yeah, yeah. And I love hearing from people who've read my books and let me know. I don't like hearing from scammers though. I get in, but yeah, from real people, that would be lovely.
Great, great. So everybody, you can reach out to her. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Wendy, for coming on the podcast. I really hope to speak again soon about your other books too.
You, Ali. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And congratulate you on a wonderful podcast.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Really appreciate it. Well, thank you so
Thank
much, Wendy.
you.
Thanks for listening to the History with Ali podcast. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify at History with Ali. See you next time.